Hey, thanks for joining us today. What we need to get done today is swap out our steering rack. Now we're going with one from an E36, which has a quicker to lock-to-lock ratio, which should give it a lot nicer, less school bus feel of steering, which a lot of these old cars have. This should be fairly straightforward. Luckily, Garagistic makes the adapter kit, so we can literally just bolt the E36 rack in. So we're going to get that done. Should go fairly straightforward since the motor is out and we can easily get to everything. So let's get to it. Okay, so since we're replacing the entire rack, everything like that, we're going to just drop the outer tie rods out of the steering knuckles, and then we'll just take the whole thing out as one assembly, make it as easy as possible. Really straightforward. There's going to be a cotter pin, and then just on this particular one, because I replaced these outers a couple years ago, it's just a 17 castle nut that holds it in place, so really simple. Sometimes on these older cars, those will get seized into place. You can try a couple different things. If you're replacing the tie rod, or you just don't care about it, you can use a pickle fork. You can hit on the tie rod to get it out. Be careful where you hit. You can either bend it, or if you hit on the threaded section itself, make sure you put the nut back on a little bit so you're not marring everything. And then we can put it back together as well. So really straightforward. So let's get that taken care of. Alright, now that this side is done, you can see the same thing on the other side. Okay, now that we have the tie rods disconnected, we can finish dropping this rack the rest of the way. There are two 13mm bolts that hold the linkage in place on the top and the bottom. Those are really simple to get to. A lot of people do say though that the power steering lines are a pain in the ass to get to. Obviously we have the motor out of the car, that's going to make life way easier. So if you're thinking about doing this swap and you're swapping the motors anyways, do it, make your life easy. At this point it looks like all that's left are two 15mm bolts that hold the rack in place. So we're going to disconnect those and it should just drop right out of the car. Well, that actually wasn't too bad. Very, very messy. Hopefully you can see in the footage. This old rack is oily / greasy to say the least. Probably could use a rebuild itself. And who knows, 200,000 miles on the car. This is probably the original rack. Not to mention, people having to put gaskets in and all that kind of stuff. I put on a head gasket in that M20, so I'm sure it's had all sorts of oil and whatnot all over it. We still gotta get the linkage off the rest of the way. Should go fairly simple. Might have to soak this in some penetrating oil overnight. Not the end of the world, so let's keep moving on. A slight change of plans. I actually decided to ditch the E36 rack. The more I thought about it, with how beat up it kind of looked. Replacing all the seals and going through all that trouble, despite being what would be a great video for you guys, is going to be very time consuming, and the bushings might actually be bad inside that rack. There's no way to tell until we dig into it. So instead of wasting around with that, decided to actually turn that in as a core charge and picked up this. Now, this is a rack out of a Z3. This is actually the best rack you can put in an E30. So a factory E30 will be four turns lock to lock. The E36 we were going to put in was actually 3.4. The Z3, however, though, is 2.7. So it's going to be extremely quick, very precise steering, which is what we want. This is a very fun, spirited weekend warrior type build. So this will be perfect to meet our needs. And since it's all torn apart, ended up buying a sway bar kit for it. It's a 22mm and a 19mm. This is from Suspension Techniques. It came in just over 400 bucks, like 440 I think after taxes. So we're going to sell that as well. And since we saw the front end all torn apart, I completely spaced off. I had these guys. These are 95A polyurethane bushings from a company called Garagistic. You've probably seen them in our previous video. We'll preach about them a lot. Great products. I ended up getting these in a kit when I did my rear subframe bushings as well. So dug these out of storage and we're going to toss these in since we're here. Let's dig into it. So we have our steering rack in. Now we have to modify our linkage. We actually need to space this section out a little bit. This is all just barely too short. Luckily our kit comes with spacers. So what we're going to do is take this little guard plate off. I believe that's just a 10 mil on either side. And then drill out these pins, pound those out. Should be able to put these in, and that should space out our linkage enough. So we have our control arm out now. Like I said, we're going to put these 95A bushings in. They just go here on the end. This is probably going to fight me. I'm going to try to slide it off. If not, probably end up cutting it. You can actually cut very carefully up to this outer race where the bushing is. They usually will relieve the tension on it and get it to pop out. Worst case scenario, we'll get this off and I'll go over to a buddy's house who has a press and we'll just press the bushing out. These should go in rather easy. I highly recommend lubing them up though before you install them because they might actually squeak on you a little bit. But they should slide on fairly nice. So let's tear it apart. Alright everyone, so that wraps up this episode. That's how we put in a E36 or Z3 steering rack. On the next one, we're going to start cleaning up this engine bay and start mocking up for an intercooler. Take care.